We are now live.
And Rob, I'll just advise you, as I know we're live right now, but I have some votes coming up,
Okay.
so I don't think that'll interrupt our ability to have a meaningful conversation, though.
Absolutely not. Well, thank you very much for your time, and welcome to everybody who's watching. We're here today with Senator Todd Young from Indiana. Senator Young serves on the Commerce Committee and the Small Business Committee, which are of great interest to our membership with the Connected Commerce Council. Prior to serving in the Senate, Senator Young served 3 terms in the U.S. House. He's also worked in the military as a captain in the U.S. Marine Corps and as an adjunct professor. He has degrees from the U.S. Naval Academy, University of Chicago, and Indiana University. We're honored to have you on here, and we really appreciate all of the work that you've done for small businesses in Indiana and throughout the country during really an unprecedented time for the country. We also have another Hoosier on board, Dr. David Aldrich. Dr. Aldrich is a professor and Emeritech Chair of Economic Development at the Indiana University, the O'Neill School of Public Affairs. He's led research teams in Germany, is a co-founder and editor-in-chief of the peer-reviewed journal Small Business Economics, and he has written over a dozen books on the links between entrepreneurship, government policy, innovation, and global competition. Professor Aldrich was also crucial in putting together our Connected Commerce Council report on the effects of COVID and the use of digital technology for small businesses. So with that, I want to ask my first question to Dr. Aldrich on sort of what were your biggest takeaways from the report that 3C conducted with Google, and how does that relate specifically to the state of Indiana?
Great. Thanks very much, Rob. Thanks very much, Senator, for joining us this opportunity. And I'll be brief because I know you've got votes to go to. Yeah, it's a great report and chock full of interesting gems. What really struck me at the end was, do you remember, I don't know, 5, 7, 10 years ago, we used to talk about a digital divide in America?
Sure.
And really in Indiana, but I mean, it was every place. It was ubiquitous between those who could use the internet and those who couldn't. We did a lot in Indiana because I had kids in school at the time to make sure grade school kids could try to bridge this gap. Well, what this report does, it has uncovered a second, maybe you could call it the other digital divide. It's not about individuals, it's about businesses. In particular, it's about small business. And it's almost like there's a world of small business that is adept at using the digital technology, can harness it to overcome challenges of globalization, but then more recently, the pandemic. Not to say these challenges are trivial, not to say that the small business always comes out on top, but it's a shot, it's a chance. And to me, that's the biggest takeaway. A second takeaway is that it's every place. I mean, we see this digital divide. You know, we used to the original digital divide about individuals. We thought that was more of a rural phenomenon, maybe less so in the wealthier urban areas. Certainly in Indiana, we thought it was more in the southern part of the state, less in central Indiana. But in fact, what we find out about this digital divide is it's in every state of the country, seems to be in every region. And so it's a challenge, it's an opportunity for every city and state in the region. About Indiana, of course, we're maybe the strongest state in the country in manufacturing. Because we're manufacturing oriented, the small businesses actually, we identify 3 groups in the study, right? Rob's probably going to talk about this. The drivers, we call them drivers. These are the ones ahead of the curve, leading the charge into the future. Then there are the maintainers, which are kind of keeping up with the status quo. And then there's adapters, which are kind of lagging behind. Indiana does real well. On average, there's about a quarter in the country of the small business is drivers. We're a little below a half, about 40%, 2%. It's not surprising given our strength in manufacturing in Indiana. This seems to drive this. What we don't know and need to learn later on down the road, because we're such an export led economy in Indiana, foreign direct investment, foreign companies are here, how those interact. My guess is these are also fueled by the drivers. But actually, Indiana comes out looking pretty good, if any place can, in the era of the pandemic. Anyway, thanks very much.
Great, thank you.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. So I hope we'll have access to that report or sometime soon. If
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
We sent a copy to your staff, and we'll send another one for you specifically. And Indiana was performing in a number of areas a little better than nationwide throughout the pandemic. Average revenue reduction was about the same on average, but the increased usage of digital tools like Zoom, Google, Facebook, Instagram, Etsy, Pinterest, all of these types of online entities. Indiana actually saw a 75% increase by small business owners using more of these tools to survive than before the pandemic. And roughly the same amount, 71%, said that they're going to continue this trend even as we reopen because they found it to be affordable and effective. And we really didn't see much of a gap. I expected there to be more of a gap between, say, Indianapolis and more rural areas, or small business owners based upon age. Older small business owners were using the digital tools about the same amount as younger business owners. Younger business owners were just a little bit more advanced in the types of tools they were using and what they were doing. But overall, Indiana performed pretty well. The big takeaway for us, as far as the Connected Commerce Council, 3C, is concerned, there are a number of small business groups out there that are focused on a whole host of issues, trade, taxes, et cetera. We're primarily focused on digital technology and how we're using these to advertise, reach customers. And the main issues we're working on in the Senate are data privacy, cybersecurity, and then competition policy, mainly antitrust. And our positions on those are pretty simple. We want to make sure that small business owners are able to comply with the law, especially since we can't afford compliance teams the way the larger companies can. And so my first question really is, I know Senator Moran has been working on a data privacy bill in Commerce Committee. There seems to be some bipartisan movement. What are your thoughts generally on, is it possible to get a bipartisan bill, and how can we get our members in Indiana at the table to make sure that, you know, they don't get stuck with a lot of new regulations that frankly we just don't have the ability to figure out how to comply with in a cost-effective manner?
Sure. Let me begin with Senator Moran's, though. Is that something that as a group you're generally supportive of his initiative, or you have concerns with?
We generally like it.
Okay.
Largely, we've met with him a couple times, and he's been very receptive to the small business perspective on it. And the main thing we like about it is he believes there should be one national bill, because the problem small business owners run into in a digital age is if you have 50 different state laws, we sell into all different states. So California obviously has an onerous CCPA, consumer protection law, that's very similar to the European law, GDPR. And there are 26 other states coming up with totally different data privacy laws and standards and cybersecurity laws and standards. And what we like with what Senator Moran is pushing is that, you know, there's one set of rules that our businesses have to learn and comply with. And we're we're hoping that that's something, we understand there's been some bipartisan support on it. So we're just kind of hoping that that can move along, so we don't have to know every different standard.
I mean, our job is to facilitate interstate commerce, right? I mean, that's in our mission statement in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. So, so I'm supportive of that broader objective, right? And I generally listen to my businesses disproportionately the smaller ones, which we hope grow into larger ones and tend to be the real innovators in our economy when it comes to these public policies. So I don't have an answer to you about whether I'm supportive of Senator Moran's bill yet. We haven't gone through a formal markup process and it hasn't gotten a hearing, but knowing that this is important to you, I'll work with him on that. I've got real concerns. It's incredibly problematic if California has one standard and 43 other states have their standards, and then you have 6 other states with all over the place. So this is so I agree with him. We need to find uniformity. Can that be done in a bipartisan way? Yeah, I think it can. There are a lot of aspects of the digital economy, specifically large tech platforms right now, that are under a high level of scrutiny, to put it mildly, for a number of reasons, right? Not just political censorship or perceived political censorship, but because of the power they wield in the market, because there can be downsides to these platforms that are creating social issues, even public health issues. That's not to say there aren't incredible upsides to them as well, right? But in terms of data privacy, I think that this is something that all of us want to find a bipartisan path to victory on. Yeah.
And when the House and Senate and various committees, I know the House Judiciary Committee has held a number of hearings on antitrust laws related to larger technology companies. And we think that that's definitely useful to look into and understand and make sure that we have a competitive marketplace. One thing that we are concerned about on that front is, could that lead to more regulation of a marketplace that the United States is undoubtedly a leader in compared to China
Yes.
and European markets? How do you weigh out consumer protection versus how do we maintain our market share internationally? And then how do we potentially write laws that allow these products to continue to innovate and to be cheap and to be affordable? Because a lot of the things that small businesses like about them is that they're cheap. A lot of them are free, and they're easy to use, and they're sort of piggybacking off of a lot of the R&D from larger companies. So
Right.
how do you view that legislative challenge of protecting consumers, but also looking out for our national interests and market share and making sure we continue to innovate?
Well, I think we need a new model, candidly, for antitrust law in this country. The antitrust law that is typically the model that's been applied in the modern era, and this was not the case, as I understand it, when the Sherman Antitrust Act was first passed. But in the modern era, you look at the impact on consumers, right? Is there predatory pricing? Is there evidence of anti-competitive behavior occurring? And that would be manifested through price signals. Well, I mean, here you have oftentimes services that are free in traditional economic terms, right? But they're really not free, because in order to utilize these services like search, you have to give something, right? And that's your data, a little piece of yourself, some information about how you live, where you shop, who your friends are, and so forth. And then the real customers are third parties who, you don't even know who they are, who want that information in order to drive their business models, most of which are no doubt benign, right? Those businesses, they offer incredible consumer value. So we don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg, the old metaphor. And we need a new way to think about this. Is bigness a concern? This was how originally antitrust law was looked at, which was, if you have a really large business and it gets too large, it's hard to define, then you need to break it up. And that leads to more competition. And then we move towards the price model. But I think we frankly need a new construct, a new sort of paradigm to think about these. And we don't have one yet. We've heard a lot of testimony in the committee I'm on, the Commerce Committee, and on other committees in Congress. But sometimes that testimony is understandably, I'd say, over-informed by the perspective of whoever's offering it, right? If you're the head of a very large social media platform who will find it advantageous to comply with the European standard, you may be pushing for that European standard here in the United States as well, right? So, so that's going to factor into this senator's thinking. But I want us to be able to look. I want to protect consumers and protect citizens in our basic rights. I want robust competition, and I want to make sure that our economy can grow at a rapid rate. And growth means people starting new businesses and growing those businesses to be larger businesses. That's what growth in the modern era means. And our dynamism in our economy has actually been trending downward, at a pretty rapid clip, almost since I was born in the early 70s. So one of the drivers of that is not enough people doing what many of you are advocating, starting new firms. And so those are all priorities. Those are all factors that will sort of like go into my thinking about which laws I'll support or which changes of the law. But none of us, candidly, I mean, there's some proposals out there that I'm not comfortable with yet. The proposed breaking up large platforms. I still feel like we need to sand and polish these proposals before they're ready for real time. But sometimes it can be helpful just to introduce bills like that. So if you have ideas about the ways we can move forward, let's do. I know I need to go vote momentarily. There is something I just as a takeaway so that all of you find value out of this. I really enjoyed, David's brief précis, his executive summary, if you will, of the report that he helped author. And one of the things I would like to do is identify those friction points that prevent companies from leveraging technology in order to sustain their operations during tough times and to grow their operations during better times. What can we do to ensure that more small businesses leverage the magic of tech in a way that people who are more digitally sophisticated have already figured out? What does that look like as a matter of public policy? So count me in as someone who understands that we haven't created any net new jobs since the late 70s in this country by large businesses. All the net new job creation has been by smaller businesses. To the extent they can leverage 21st century technologies to make that happen, I'm very excited about working in this space on small business, on commerce, on finance, on all my committees.
Great. If you have time, one of the questions that came in from one of your constituents was, what is your read on the election results? They mentioned briefly that The country essentially voted for divided government again. And as somebody that works across the aisle, as you have with Senator Bennett and others.
Let me quickly address that, then I'm going to go vote.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So oftentimes, good things can come out of divided government. You can get things done. Yeah, I mean, I think we should see whatever the results are as an opportunity. I think it's fashionable to get things done again. I think people are tired of gridlock in Washington. That's where the vast majority of the country is. There are loud voices on the polls of left and right. There have been for a while, but we're starting to hear a lot more from people center out wanting us to work together. This is a space that is not controversial, blessedly. And I think it's ripe for action. So
Great.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for all you do. And we look forward to talking to you again in the future. Thank you, Senator. David, do we have you?
Yes. I'm coming back.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
There we are.
I thought that was I thought that was helpful. I had a lot of questions I wanted to get to. Namely, I'll go ahead and ask you because you're also an expert on these issues.
The other people can turn on their screens now, right?
Yeah, I think everyone can turn their screens on. Yeah. I mentioned this before, not on this particular webcast, but a decade ago, I worked on TARP and Dodd-Frank after the financial collapse. And there was no doubt in either party or in any country or in any state in the country that we were losing 750,000 jobs a month. The market had tanked. Confidence was at an all-time low. The disagreements, of course, are always in what do you do next. This crisis seems different in that we see the stock market continue to grow. Unemployment, we were kind of getting back a lot of the jobs that were lost. We don't know if it's a V shape or a K shape, but there's enough ambiguity in the data to where a conservative or a liberal could look at it and spin it in a way that says the economy is coming back great or it's doing terribly. Where do you see the current landscape, not for small businesses, but macro too, of where are we and, do we need another PPP program or another $2 or $3 trillion stimulus program?
I have to confess. It's a great question, Rob, really, because it's kind of, where's the country at in this uncharted time of, a pandemic we've never experienced. And my confession is it's almost for my profession, economics, because we came of age and got used to talking about the economy as if it's one thing. Back when I was in Wisconsin as a student and beyond, there was a sense of pretty much people lived or died by the economy. What you're characterized, I think it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. We know the variance of experience, not just in this country, but in all the developed countries. Even the European countries, in some ways even more, are experiencing, they're exhibiting the same thing. It's a global trend. And I think in a way, our ability to characterize the economy, it's no longer just one thing. We all got comfortable talking about unemployment. Really, my whole career was if unemployment was low, we were doing good. We'd look at growth. More and more till we realize the variant. And so, your observations about the stock market, certain segments, certain parts, it's a heterogeneous situation. And I think that it's independent of politics or where we are on the spectrum. The good news is that there's in adjusting, reacting, harnessing the opportunities from the pandemic, there's a lot of opportunities. We're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs harness those opportunities that drives growth. On the other hand, there's increasing segments of people, companies, industries that aren't participating. And this is an issue in every country, every society. So where are we? The glass is the glass half full, half empty? It's both. The other point I just throw in is that more than ever, we're linked in to what's going on in the rest of the world. So when China tanked back in the spring, I think that's one of the reasons why manufacturing in Indiana, it's kind of one of the small results that said, why are they expecting revenues to be low in Indiana? I think it's because the manufacturers knew without China supplying parts or providing markets, it was affecting the manufacturing markets all around the world. Same thing with Europe. In that sense, almost every country in the world realizes more and more we're a small country in a big global world. The opportunities are there globally, but in the end, we're going to be affected by what happens in the world.
Right. And, I've often been told in politics when you're dealing with voters and reaching out to voters that the most important economy in the world is their own. And, we see some people doing well throughout the pandemic and a lot of other people suffering, and disproportionately on the lower income side, particularly in the service industries. I'd like to bring in, to get more of a microeconomic approach, Stella Cruz, who's the CEO of Morgan Miller Plumbing, and Charlie Mayer, who's the COO of the Spice House, to get their personal stories for their businesses since the pandemic hit. And if you could also talk a little bit about how you've utilized different digital tools and technologies to get through this time. We'll start with Stella.
Get myself unmuted here. This has definitely been unprecedented in our world. As a service company, it's trying because we're out in public, and we had no idea what was going to happen. We were fortunate though, because we have embraced the digital world. And so we have already got a presence digitally for our marketing. And not only that, but we already had we had already embraced going digital as far as running our operations. So our dispatching, our field tech tracking, all of that was already digital. And so there were definitely some pain points. Teaching plumbers how to use Zoom was pretty exciting. But we were able to pivot our marketing so quickly. We usually take a pretty lighthearted approach to our marketing because plumbing's not very exciting and it's dirty. And we immediately switched to, we're all wearing our PPE, we're out here, as an essential service to serve everyone. And we were able to weather the storm pretty well. We had about a 30% downturn in business. And we just buckled down and got through it. And I really don't know how we would have managed to retain all of our employees and keep our book of business running as smoothly as we did without all of the tools that were available to us just right there at our fingertips.
What types of tools were you using?
Well, we already were using the full gamut of the social platforms for our marketing. So we had the Google suite of services, our Google business page, Facebook, Yelp. So on the marketing side, we were already sort of ingrained in all of those, but we also are using our dispatching system, which is called Pazerware. We were using that. It's all digital, so we can dispatch from home, from our cars, wherever we're at. Even our accounting software, our QuickBooks, is online. So thankfully for voice over IP telephone systems, our office staff was able to scatter, go home, hook up their computers, and business just kept going pretty seamlessly.
And I think I heard you say you didn't have to let anybody go. Or
We didn't, and
wow.
we were so fortunate. I think like millions of other businesses, those first 2, 3 weeks, we were just, we had no idea what was going to happen. And so we just worked through it really hard and were able to retain everyone. We had some days that are quieter, but we just accepted those as sort of mental health days for everyone because everyone needed a little extra time to process what was going on also.
Did you
Uh,
look at it? Did you look into any of the PPP loans or any of the government?
we did. We hopped on that right away again because like everybody else, we didn't know if we were going to get to stay open, if our phones were going to keep ringing. And so, yeah, we were
Was
in on the
that
first wave
process
of that.
was
Yeah.
that process onerous or difficult in any way?
I would have to say it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Um, Luckily, we are pretty organized with our bookkeeping, and we outsource our HR. So I was able to get my hands on the reports I needed to submit our application fairly quickly. And so it wasn't as bad as I thought. I think what's been harder is interpreting everything that happens afterwards and the repayment and the tax implications and things like that that are still, being debated today.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty in that space. Charlie Mayer with the Spice House. Um, Tell us a little bit about your business and uh, your experience. Was it similar to Stella's, or walk us through the pandemic for the Spice House?
Yeah, we're basically like the spice selling equivalent of Stella's plumbing business. Very similar across all of the digital tools, right down to QuickBooks Online, which actually makes a huge difference when you can run all of your core functions from anywhere. So that's one major point of similarity. We also had a tremendous amount of uncertainty around the same time. We in those days had about 60 to 70 employees in our company, and we were unsure whether or not we were going to survive as a company. And so we made some very quick furloughs that we put into place in the third week of March. And that turned out to be a big mistake because COVID exploded spice demand. So we very quickly saw demand that was beyond our wildest expectations. And I was just talking to a colleague this morning, just taking stock of where we are as the holiday season begins. And he's like, it's crazy, but it's really not that crazy because basically we've been dealing with holiday demand since the end of March. And so as a result of that, we actually have doubled the size of our staff. After doing a furlough, we brought everybody back within 2 weeks and have never stopped hiring. So that's where we are. The digital thing for us is absolutely essential. We're a 60-plus-year-old company with 4 brick and mortar stores. But we've been on the internet for 20 years, and it therefore was not that hard for us to close our physical stores when we absolutely had to do that. As a food business, and in fact, as a part of the the essential infrastructure of the United States, we're allowed to stay open, but we closed in March and stayed closed until the end of June, and just moved everything online. We did a lot of store pickup, so that's essentially like we operate almost like a restaurant. You place your order online and then come by the store and pick it up. We even experimented a little bit with delivery through Grubhub, although we found that to be less successful than just conditioning people to place their order online and then swing by the store and pick it up. So all of that has turned out really well for us. And so far, 2000 is not just turning out to be a good year, it's turning out to be an amazing year for the growth of our business. However, it's also been extremely challenging as we try to keep everybody safe. In the early days of the crisis, we sort of sat down and tried to figure out who we're most accountable to. And we're most accountable to our customers and to our employees and our community. And so every decision that we made about opening or not opening or reducing the size of the team or increasing the size of the team, we sort of thought about those decisions in that context, which was really helpful.
Do you think that this could become a new normal? I mean, obviously as things open back up and maybe people aren't cooking at home as much or, going back out to eat, do you think it's a new normal for post-vaccine, post-pandemic world that you'll be doing more and more online and maybe not reopen physical stores?
Yes and no. We certainly believe that there was a trend already underway that was moving retail out of brick and mortar and onto the internet, and COVID has accelerated that. But it has also reminded us, especially in our industry, which is a very aromatic one, a very experiential one, that when you don't have a physical store to go to, you lose part of the experience. And so we're trying really hard to build up our online presence to give people that sense of experience and that sense of community. But there is really nothing that can replace walking into a store. And so we think that uh, even though the web business is growing constantly and the retail business is it's flat. It's in some cases it grows, and in other cases it doesn't. It's still wonderful, and we still want to have it. But something that Stella said about teaching plumbers how to use Zoom reminded me that we've spent a lot of time this year teaching some of our customers how to order on the internet. And you'd be surprised by the number of people who placed their first web orders in the last couple of months because they couldn't swing by the store. And we will take orders over the phone, but we would much prefer to teach you how to place an order on the internet so that we don't always have to talk to you whenever you need a bag of paprika.
Well, and I think in your business model, I'm thinking of myself going into spice. I went into the spice market in Morocco. And if you're just trying to find something that's in a recipe and order it online, you might buy one or two things. But by the time I walk into the store and somebody explains to me everything else, I end up walking out with, a full shopping bag
Exactly.
of spices that I never even knew existed.
Right.
And so
Right.
there still is an important element to, seeing it and whether it's a high-end retail nursery or you're really into fly fishing or golf at a high level, having somebody there still does matter. But I do think that a lot of the sales are shifting online no matter what. And some of those services and information can still be delivered online.
Yeah. Your point about the spice market is exactly right. And in fact, we are launching a new feature today that in the e-commerce world is just called bundling. So it's this idea that you can buy one thing for a price, but if you're buying that thing, you might consider these other things. And if you buy all of them together, we can give you a little discount. And it is, it's a traditional upsell. It's not a new idea in e-commerce, but it's not something that we did pre-COVID. And it's something that we've really missed doing when we haven't had the stores open, because when somebody comes into the store, it's exactly like your Moroccan spice market experience. You go for the one thing, but you end up leaving with other things. And so that's really something that we're trying to communicate digitally.
I'm glad I did. David, I think you were going to jump in there.
Well, I was going to say, in better times, I invite you all over and I'll show you my collection of CDs I purchased from street musicians that are still unplayed, right? You buy them because you hear the music, you get excited, and I'm sure it's different with the spices, but that experience really matters. And, as great as the digital experience is, yeah, I could imagine that we're not going to totally retreat into a digital life once things return to normal.
And this question is for all three of you. What if we didn't have Zoom? What if we didn't have a lot of these digital tools? on March 13th, where would we be? I mean, in your opinion, where would your business be? Stella and Charlie and David, based on your research, how much deeper, how much deeper would the hole be without the digital tools that Stella and Charlie? We'll start with Stella. I think you're on mute. Sorry.
No, I'm thinking it's. I can't even begin to express how hard it would have been. I mean, just even putting in our application for the PPE money would have been taken weeks to get the information and process it and get it to where it needed to go. I mean, even today, because COVID is exploding everywhere and the numbers in Kansas City are just going up astronomically. So it's almost a harder environment to work in now than it was back in March when we were officially locked down, when nobody even knew anybody that had it. And now I've got people regularly that are being exposed. You know, I have to re-enroll my employees for their insurance this month, and the only way to do that is via a Zoom meeting. And so back in March to have our operations, you know, try to stay socially distanced from one another and still operate we definitely wouldn't have been able to retain all of our staff. And still keep everyone safe, and even source the PPP that we need, or PPE that we need, for them to go out and do their jobs. So I just can't imagine not having that at our fingertips.
Some businesses need PPP to get PPE. All right, Charlie.
We'd be closed. I mean, it's just that simple. The vast majority of our revenue actually comes through Shopify, which is the world's biggest online e-commerce platform. We use it in our stores as well, but it's the cash register for our business. And well, it's not only the cash register, it's also the store. So we would not have been in a situation where customers could even find us. And so unlike a service business, you know, whether it's plumbing or any kind of home improvement or a kind of thing where you go and serve customers where they need service, people come to us. And so our storefront is digital. And so without that, we would not have had a business.
Do you find that your customers, this is more of a personal question, do you find that your customers are more already experts on spices and they're serious cooks? Because otherwise they might just go to the grocery store. So do you think that has helped too, that there's still that demand for that marketplace?
Yeah. So one of the dynamics at play here, and it really gets to Google tools, is that it's not just that people need spices. It's that they need spices online. And since they've got the time, they might as well shop around and see what's the most enticing. And so the investments that we made in search engine optimization and digital marketing and Instagram and Facebook and all of these digital tools, that has always been an important part of our business, but it really paid off when we had existing consumers who had more time and more interest to search around, and new consumers who found us because they figured they'd be cooking, so they might as well have the best stuff. You know, our business, as any online business, we don't do great in a situation where you need it right now. Amazon is definitely working on that, and you know, we do have dreams of being able to drop a spice shipment with a drone within 15 minutes of your order, but for the moment we don't have that. And so people who need to run down to the store to get their spices, like, we're not really going to be able to satisfy that. but people who are thinking ahead and hunkering down. And there's a lot of that going on again right now, which is also fueled by the holidays, by the way. So you've got people who need all their spices for the holidays, but they also are stocking up because who knows, it's going to be a long winter. We keep hearing that. And they're sitting at home with not much else to do, and they spend a lot of time searching. All of that becomes a positive e-commerce experience. And that's one of the dynamics driving our business right now.
Great. David, I'm going to finish with you. Speaking of, people having more time on their hands, I read a lot about the 1917, 1918 pandemic. And I know we're here promoting digital technology, so it's unfair to say, would this have been as bad without digital technology? But how bad would it have been?
Rob, I know that I seem old, but I'm not that old.
I didn't,
No,
I didn't, I didn't peg you
I
that
love-
far back.
I love your question because it's the counterfactual question. The first says, what would it have been? Because, we all live in this era where, we're all complaining about we can't do what we're used to doing, and, things are more, complicated, and everybody's full of complaints. But your counterfactual question just kind of jolts us. If in fact we didn't have digital technologies, that crash, and we've actually been lucky, given what's happened, the pandemic, one would have thought, I would have thought, you know what? The impact on businesses like Stella, Charlie's, on everybody's lives, the school, everything would have been way more dramatic, what we know, going back and say, looking at the 1990 pandemic, but then thinking of other episodes of crises like the Great Depression. The Great Depression was a disaster for a decade. At its depth, 1 out of 4 people were destitute, unemployed. Production went down. I mean, I'm just eyeballing it. I think without the digital technology, I think we would have been, GDP would have fallen by from a third to a half. I think unemployment would have skyrocketed. We'd be in such bad shape. And it reminds us that, yes, this is a struggle, but the digital technologies have really been kind of a cushion. And we hear kind of just their experiences, in my own too. I mean, yours too, right? We can have events like this. We can get through it without those digital technologies. I think that would become kind of a nightmare for not just for the economy and business, but for society. It would have been really bad. Would have been worse than the 1919 situation because in a way this is more disruptive.
Right. And I touched on that a little bit with the senator. And
yeah,
my point was, and I think I explicitly said it, was we're heading into a regulatory debate where we could disrupt some of these technologies and make these tools either less effective and or more expensive. And I wanted to sort of put in his ear how important it is to think about the end user and to think about the small businesses that really are the ones holding this together. I've started 4 of them. It's difficult to run and compete, but I don't think it's ever been easier to start a small business, which is really the scariest stage, those first 6 months of getting a business card and coming up with a logo, which you can do online for $50 to $250. You don't need to hire a graphics designer. You can have 100 of them compete to design your logo. Coming up with websites, building websites, things that were really expensive when I started a business 10 years ago that are a lot cheaper and frankly better today. And so those are sort of the thoughts that we're working on at 3C. And we certainly appreciate your scholarly work on this report and that input. We rely on and need the work that Stella is doing with your business and small businesses across the country, that really are what 3C is about. And frankly, without your stories, we're not as informed as we can be to go in and affect public policy. And it's critical, whether you live in Indiana and Senator Young is your senator, or you live in name the state. It's very critical that you get engaged and either come to Washington or participate on Zoom meetings, write letters, make phone calls. For 3C, we're actively educating. I don't say lobbying, I say educating members of Congress and state legislators and states attorneys general that are looking at these big picture issues and well-intentioned. I mean, I think there are a lot of them that are looking at data privacy and cybersecurity and competition policy. I think they are approaching it from a well-intentioned standpoint. But if they're not hearing from you, you might end up with new laws that are hard to comply with, that are expensive to comply with, and that could alter your bottom line or put you out of business. And so that's why we're here, to sort of bring the scholarly academic world, business owners and entrepreneurs who are doing the work, and public policy makers that affect all of us. And I appreciate each and every one of you today for telling your story, and I hope you will participate in more 3C events going forward. Thank you very much. And that's it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thank you.
Rob.
Thank you.